Last year, I built my first ever aquarium, and unfortunately, this is what that tank looks like now.
Well, that didn't work out.
This tank battled a nasty pest snail infestation and had to be torn apart to be moved 1,200 miles from Florida all the way up to New York, where the heater then died during the dead of winter. These shrimp have been through a lot, but I want nothing but the best for them. So as soon as we were done moving, I got to work on a tank that was bigger, better, and most importantly, more reliable and healthy for my little crustacean kingdom. And it all starts with this. This is a shelf we made from some old planting boxes back at the old apartment, but it was one box too tall to work in our current setup. So I took one of the boxes off and it was the perfect height. I put down this towel to add a little bit of a buffer so that the shelves would sit evenly and not rock when we put weight on them. The shelves passed the classic sit test, so I was sure they would hold the weight of the tank. Next I put down this foam, which was actually part of this tank at one point. This tank is a 17.5 gallon rimless aquarium, and we got it on an insane discount because of this foam peeling off. We had collected some driftwood and other sticks we wanted to use for the tank many months ago, and we let them fully dry out to make it safe for our sea critters. Now that they were ready, I began soaking them to try and get some of the tannins out, and also hopefully waterlog them a bit so they might sink. I used water very close to boiling to make sure to kill off of any bacteria that might be on the wood, and I put some rocks on top of the wood to make sure they would be fully submerged. While these were soaking for a while, I started to build out the rest of the tank, starting with just a good old cleaning. I just used water and a microfiber cloth, no soap or anything. The last thing that was in here was aqua soil, so any of this dirt in the corners is completely fine since that's all it really is. For this tank though, I'm actually retracting my original idea from a few months ago of trying aqua soil, and I'm going with the classic method of using a layer of topsoil for the plants to root into and then capping it with gravel. I poured in my topsoil, but this time I opted not to sift it and just removed any wood pieces and crushed up any large clumps. I then went on to wet the soil, and I will admit I put way too much water in. I kind of turned the soil into a watery mud, but it'll be fine in the end. After this came the gravel, but before I put it in, I made sure to rinse it all off thoroughly in a bucket, which would hopefully stop any mystery particles from clouding up my water. After rinsing it all, I poured it into the tank, aiming for about a 3 centimeter layer of both for a total of a 6 centimeter substrate. I tried to pull back some of the soil to let the gravel come all the way up to the front of the glass, and it kind of worked, but it was still kind of dirty and didn't really do very much. At least not that you could see without a light on it. After the wood had soaked for a few days with some water changes, my girlfriend, who's been helping the entire time behind the scenes, helped plan out the hardscape. We tinkered around for a while and found an idea that we liked, so we started gluing some stuff down. Super glue that's made with cyanoacrylate is aquarium safe once it dries, so we got some and used some cotton balls to try and get everything to soak in. The cotton balls didn't really do anything, but the super glue itself did help to make sure that all the rocks and woods stayed where we wanted them. The next day, after we finished the hardscape, the plants had arrived. I ordered these plants from Aquarium Co-op, and I had never purchased anything from them before, but I was incredibly happy with not only the plants, but also their shipping. I forgot to take a video of it, but every plant was insanely healthy and very well packaged. One major mistake I made last time was not washing all the plants when I got them. That is what caused the massive snail infestation and the damselfly larva outbreak, as they hitched a ride on some pro-weed from the last website I ordered from. As you can see, I gave everything a very thorough cleaning to avoid that this time. Overall, I ended up getting a handful of java ferns, a few cups of pro-weed, some Amazon swords, some java moss, and lastly, one bundle of Anubias. When it came to planting, I wanted to have an actual plan this time, as opposed to just putting stuff wherever like I did in the last tank. I planted the swords along the back wall, hoping that they'll grow and create a huge background element. I then planted a few ferns in the mid-ground, weaved in between the logs and stones to create an overgrown tree trunk kind of idea. With the ferns in, I placed the pro-weed in a couple random clumps around the left side of the tank, and as it grows, I'll continue to trim it and replant it until it forms a nice thick carpet. With the plants in, I then began to fill the tank up with water. After it was filled, I scraped off some of the oxygen bubbles and added a filter and a light, and then sat back and took a good look at everything for the first time. After sitting back and looking at the tank for a while, I added some hangers onto the back and took some trimmings of Monstera and Pothos and placed them inside, hoping that they would root into the water and start growing up and over the edge of the tank. I added the heater, and with that, I was done with the setup for today and went to bed. When I woke up the next morning and checked the tank, disaster had struck. This wood was clearly not ready to be put in this tank. It was leaching tannins like crazy and was clouding up the water super bad. Another thing that any experienced aquascapers watching might have noticed is that I planted some of these plants very wrong, and if I don't fix it now, they could all die very quickly. One of the plants I got the most of is Java Fern, which is a rhizome plant. Rhizome plants feed off of this little bulb that sits between the roots and the leaves. If this bulb is cut off by being buried or covered, the plant will suffocate and die off. So with that information and the water looking the way it did, I fully drained the tank and replanted all the Java Ferns. I superglued many of them to the hardscape, making sure only to use small dabs not to suffocate the rhizome. There were a few that I bundled together with a rubber band and then put only one layer deep in the gravel, just enough to hold them down, but since this gravel was pretty large, there should be enough water flow to these bundles to survive. With everything replanted properly, I refilled the tank, and I did add a bag of Purigen to the filter to hopefully control the tannins a bit. At this point, I let the tank sit without interruption, aside from a few water changes to control the tannins, which thankfully were only really bad for the first couple of days. A few weeks later, the tank had made some great progress. The Amazon swords in the back had sprouted multiple new stems, and the same for the porweed up front. The Pothos and Monstera have begun rooting into the tank, and the Java Fern, although not really growing much yet, were looking pretty happy and healthy. The water was still a bit yellow from tannins, but it was a healthy amount, and it didn't really get too much worse than this. At this point, I made the decision to add my shrimp. Unfortunately, I did lose a couple in the process, but overall, most of the shrimp had arrived safely, and got right to work chowing down on some algae and some food I had dropped in there for them. Later on, I'll add more to this aquarium, but for now, I'm just gonna let the shrimp live in peace. Most of them have lost a lot of their color due to stress and the inconsistent conditions of the temporary setup, and I just hope that now that they're in a better tank with all the proper parameters, they'll start feeling a little better. This tank will take a long time to mature, but for now, I'm pretty happy with it. I like to think that I've learned a lot since my first build, and a good amount of it is thanks to this book. This is not sponsored, but I was offered a copy for free after my first video, and I genuinely learned a lot from it. I came into this hobby knowing absolutely nothing, and it's been a joy to learn as much as I possibly can about not only building aquariums, but also safely and happily housing the creatures inside of them. This book contains tons and tons of useful information from years and years of experience, and it's really been a treat to be able to have access to this information so early on. Since my last video, I have really fell in love with aquariums and other creature enclosures. It's been genuinely amazing to see the hobby support me as such a fresh face with really no experience. Please go grab a copy of Oliver's book. I'll leave a link in the description, and thank all of you for sticking around to watch this process. I will post updates on my Instagram, so please follow me there. Thank you for watching.